All right. So if you guys can hear me and see my screen, let me know in the chat. And, it's been a while. I missed you guys. Did you miss me? Did you miss me? I missed you. Missed me? I missed you. Yeah, it's been a couple of days. I had towards the end, I'll kind of shoot the shit while we give everybody a couple minutes to come on in here. Towards the end of last week, I had a couple of days at an event actually with some of my top clients. It was unbelievable. It's so interesting because this world is just absolutely all over the place, right? It's like I saw a tweet recently, and this probably describes it well. I can't remember exactly what it said, but it said something like, "There's too many crises going on for me to be able to process, like, or for my brain to be able to process," right? And it's so true. And the crazy part is there's so much bad news, there's so much good news, there's blah 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 blah. What does this mean? What does that mean? And so I find it's like the pinball economy, right? I used to say it's like the landmine economy. Now it's like the pinball economy. But I had this event with my clients last week, and it was so interesting because, literally for those 3 days, I'm going through with everybody, tax firms, accounting firms, mixed service firms, and so on. And, so many of them, they're so fortunate. When you look at how many businesses have been affected by this whole change this year, and I mean, it's interesting as well. Like, what do you even call this year anymore, right? Because you've got, the whole, um, you've got the whole situation with the virus. Then you've also got the lockdowns, you've got the unemployment, you've got the protests, you've got the riots, you've got all this stuff kind of coming together. It's hard to even know what this year even is anymore. And you know, through that, it was amazing to see just how many people had. And the way I look at it for a tax and accounting firm is like, all right, let's say right now it's June 5th, right? From January 1st to June 5th, what were your total sales on in that time period, and compare that to last year in 2019. Now, it's particularly interesting for tax and accounting firms because tax season got pushed in a lot of cases. Now, depending on how people bill, depending on how people charge, some people already charge for that, some people already delivered those services, but some people, they still have a lot of tax preparation work to be delivered sometime over the summer. However, the number of people where their sales are up year to date versus last year, even though they've got that deferred tax prep revenue, was staggering. Because so many people, you would think, kind of because that tax prep revenue got pushed, and you also had this entire sort of economic crisis, you would think, oh my gosh, like, how are their sales going to be up? And so if you're a tax and accounting firm right now and your sales are up year to date, and you've got that deferred tax prep revenue, my gosh, you're having a good year. You're having a good year. Am I right? Because I mean, it's really like if your sales are even flat year to date, then they're really up, right? And so, one of the things that I talked about a little bit with, our team at this event last week was, how do you think about picking a niche, and how do you think about kind of crafting your marketing messaging, right? And whenever I think about picking a niche, I think about, okay, like, who is my niche going to be? Okay. Also, what am I going to offer them? And then what is the message or the story that I'm going to kind of send to those people? Be like, hey, here's what I can help you with, right? How do you write that kind of story? But I'm going to share my screen here in a second because I think there's an interesting sort of framework to put on this, because when you look at all the businesses out there, it's not that easy anymore like it used to be. Like, I had a client come through a few weeks ago. She said, Andrew, what niche do I pick? I've been thinking about medical practices and construction companies. And I was like, I realized, like, over the years, I've had this methodology for thinking about how to select the niche you're going to go after. But now, I mean, clearly the economy has changed. Clearly, there are some industries that are not as good as others, right? And so, how do we think about kind of picking who we're going to work with now, given everything that's going on, right? And I put together a little bit of a framework for thinking about it. And it's not clear. It's not clearly like this industry, that industry, this industry, that industry. Because if you think about it, like, okay, in the restaurant industry, there are a lot of people that have been negatively affected, but there are some people that haven't been negatively affected. And so I'm going to share with you guys a little bit, like, go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see if I can do it. I just got a new computer. So let's see, can we do it? Oh, looks like we can. Let's see if that works. So like a good example is like in the travel industry, right? You've got people that are doing RVs and camping that are crushing it, right? Whereas you've got people that are doing Airbnbs or hostels where it's kind of like, maybe not the best time in the history of that business, right? And then you've also got like food and restaurant where it's like, okay, full service Mexican restaurant, let's say, not great. And then you've got something like Butcher Box, where my wife actually had this, and they are not accepting customers because their sales are exploding because there's a shortage of meat in so many supermarkets that they deliver high quality meats and people are trying to subscribe and they can't fulfill the customers, right? And then you look at like software as a service companies where it really depends, right? I mean, there's some software as a service companies where they were focusing on a specific industry and they've seen a massive hit to sales if they're focused on restaurants or certain affected industries. And then others where, oh my gosh, things are booming. And it's funny because I did this presentation before the protests and before these riots. And when I did it, I was talking about how the physical world is kind of like a distressed environment, and then you've got sort of the digital world where things are sort of growing, and like if you think about it, right? Think about how much worse the physical world has gotten in the last 6 months versus the digital world, right? The digital world is only getting better. It's like, people are providing new products, new services, and, but in the physical world, it's like, as of 10 days ago, it was pretty weird, right? There were all these government restrictions, government regulations. There was like people wearing masks. There's all this like questioning about the virus, and some places are still locked down. And like, are you going to go somewhere and get infected? And there's test sites everywhere. And there's all this weird stuff going on in the physical world as of 10 days ago. And then add on top of that, so many of these, store owners, they opened up they closed down their store for the lockdowns, right? And then the lockdowns are done, they're getting ready to reopen, or they are reopening, and then bam, their store gets looted. I saw a story of a guy the other day who had 6 different restaurants that were destroyed. That's a lot of restaurants to be destroyed. And imagine if you were already down for 2 months, sales were down, you're borrowing money just to be able to make expenses, and then on top of all that, you have to re-renovate 6 separate restaurants. I mean, that could be like $1 million. I mean, I don't know the extent of the damages for him specifically, but it could be hundreds of thousands, if not, $1 million or more, depending on the extent of the damage. And so the physical world, and I'm kind of wondering too, like, what other things might happen in the physical world? And so it's interesting to think about sort of the difference between the world of sort of atoms, right, that physical world, and the world of bits, the internet, and how much harder things have gotten. In the physical world, there's like uncertainty. I took this picture actually from The Matrix, where Morpheus shows Neo like, oh, this is what the world looks like now, right? Government regulation, sort of this dystopian feel. There's also like, they keep talking about how they want to do litigation support for the business owners, because the business owners, if their team members get sick or if their customers get sick, like right now, there's no legislation protection for them. And so it's a severely inhibited environment. And by the way, when I did this presentation, there wasn't even any riots, right? Plus, you add that in here. The digital world getting better by the minute, new frontier, improved product customer experience fueled by the changes. And, I kind of put down here a list of, industries that are just kind of inconvenienced. At first, when I first started doing this, it's like, these industries are dead. And it's like, well, they're not really dead, right? But they certainly are inconvenienced. I mean, think about it. Like all the things that we've been talking about here, right? Not to mention the riots on top of it, which affected so many of these different types of businesses. And then in the new economy where, things are growing now at a faster pace. Some of them were growing before, some of them weren't. And it's just going absolutely nuts. And so, really when you look at it between these two, like, how do you think about who you're going to be working with? And so I kind of walked through this with my clients, and I said, I kind of think about the small business economy right now in these 4 different categories, okay? And I kind of think about, all right, well, think about if you come across a small business and they're coming back online now, but their services aren't really needed. So let's think about like what was the example that I used? Yeah, an escape room, right? So I just like the idea of an escape room because it's like, well, was an escape room really needed before this? No. And now it's just going to be like a slight inconvenience, right? I'd rather not get the flu or, COVID, which is sort of, a terrible version of the flu. Um, f- you know, I'd rather not get that going to an escape room. So could I just skip out on an escape room for a year or two? Yeah, probably, right? And so it's these things that are not really needed. And I honestly don't even know if these are even going to be true. Like, will Airbnbs be needed, not needed? Will gyms, craft breweries? Like, I'm not saying that those fall into those categories. It's just interesting because I think some of them will. Some Airbnbs might be unneeded, and we'll have to see how it fully affects that kind of a market. And then there's also businesses that are impacted, right? So where, they were hit hard by the virus, the lockdowns, the economic crisis, but they're going to come back, right? So you look at things like doctors, dentists, chiropractors, and so on, where they might have had months where sales were down 50%, 70%, 90% or more, but they're going to come back at relatively strong 70, 80, 90% or a full return over the next 12 months. And then you look at industries where they're unaffected. And a lot of times this is like, you'll see a construction company where, in the construction company, there's just a lot of like people that didn't lose their contracts, whether they were government contracts or even private, and they were a lot of times deemed essential services. And then like a lot of online consultants. So like if a lawyer was working online with industries that weren't affected, a lot of them are fine, right? A lot of them are fine. A lot of different consultants online were sort of fine through it, where they weren't really affected. And then you look at people like COVID beneficiaries, and they're sort of, I kind of break those into two categories. Like one is where, they obviously, businesses grew during this time. They benefited from it. But one is where they were already in a business that gets a bump. Like anything that was in delivery or cybersecurity or e-commerce got a bump. Or they sort of like pivoted to a growing industry. Like, they're like, I'm going to do a mask making company. Like I know a guy who did a mask making company, got like $65 million of government contracts doing mask making, right? Or hand sanitizer or whatever the case may be. And so when you look at a small business owner right now, these things are really important to understand because it's going to affect what services you offer, right? If someone's unneeded, you might be looking at government support. You might be looking at, really, okay, what's going on the balance sheet? Like how many months left until we run out of cash? How many months left until we run out of credit? How many months left until we're going to file bankruptcy? As opposed to someone who's COVID beneficiary, where you might be looking at, all right, hey, this person just tripled their income. We need to do tax planning. We need to take a look at the CFO services. We need to take a look at wealth management. And so it's going to affect the services that you're offering based on where they're at. And like I said before, it's not clear like industry to industry. And so, I kind of went through and put together for all of the people that came to our most recent event newsletter templates. So these are templates you can send to your clients. You can even send, like, if you don't know which category your clients are in, or like a lot of you've got clients in multiple different places here. Like if you were to look at the software industry, they're going to be in each of these areas because they serve all the other industries, right? And so, that's one example, or even lawyers kind of fall in every category. It really does depend on what type of services that they're doing. So these templates, you can either send them like, oh, everybody in my niche was, if you're doing restaurants, like everybody in my niche was impacted or impacted / unneeded. We'll have to see the degree to which that's the case. And so you might say, oh, I'm going to use those. Okay, but you might say, well, in my industry, people fall in all of these. And so, you have to kind of communicate to them based on where they're at, right? And then also the Facebook ads and also the Facebook funnel for that. And, this kind of communication has been incredibly helpful to see. Like, for example, you'll see like people that are unneeded, they're kind of thinking like, is my industry ever going to return? How can I possibly survive this? I may have to close my business. I can't survive on 30% of the sales I used to have. Can I pivot my business to service other customers? Unaffected is like, wow, I dodged a bullet. The lockdowns didn't get me, but will a recession get me? How can I start planning for troubled waters ahead? How do I address the tax changes in the CARES Act? How can I take advantage of some of these? Like, we go through, and these are just topics of what's in that person's head, but that's different than necessarily going through and saying, all right, okay, now I'm going to email this person. Now I'm going to market to them. Now I'm going to send them and then say, oh, because you are a COVID beneficiary, you need tax planning. Because you are unneeded, you need relief lending. You need CARES Act tax planning. You need a forecast and a budget. And so it's totally different now. If you're just thinking, oh, I'm just going to go out and do my same thing, you got to be careful. I had a client who made a great statement probably 2 weeks ago. She said, in the old economy, I would see something, and if I wanted it, I'd buy it. Now, when I look at something, I think, do I need that? Do I need that? And that's the thing is people are retreating with their checkbook unless they can see deep value, unless they can see that you deeply understand them, right? Unless they can see that you are going to be able to solve specific sets of problems, particularly related to where they're at today in this new economy, okay? And so I wanted to share that with you guys. If you guys would like to get access to some of these marketing materials, if you'd like to get access to some of the newsletter campaigns, some of the Facebook ads, some of the funnel templates, and if you like to kind of change the way you're communicating with different segments, you can go ahead and do that at accountingtax.com. Go ahead and opt in there. There's a little video, talks a little bit about what we're doing, how we built out the marketing, sales, and service delivery for the relief lending, the CARES Act, the forecasting, the budgeting, the tax planning, CFO, wealth management, all that stuff, okay? And then also the marketing to be able to market it and sell that and then fulfill on it. So if you guys have not had a chance to check that out, I wanted to shoot this quick video and give you a little bit of an update. I will. I know. My team's getting on to me too. I'm coming back for a more regular video session. I might even do a more regular time as I just kind of popped on here before we get to the end of the weekend. But hope that you guys have an awesome rest of your day. If you want more information, accountingtax.com.